What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, and it looks like it's finally happened. Capcom is totally screwed. Right now there are rumors that they're actually about to close down or be bought out. They need money and they need it badly. Now this may be a little bit shocking to people like me because you see so many giant releases this year. Normally when you see a studio getting close to bankruptcy, they start to scale back. They try and just work on one giant flagship to make sure they're not bleeding money quite as quickly, but right now it's weird. We're still seeing stuff like Monster Hunter is a couple weeks away, we're still seeing Street Fighter V DLC, and Marvel Vs Capcom just came out a few weeks ago. But talking about those also kind of highlights the fact that none of these have been particularly successful. You'd expect something like Street Fighter, which has been around for so many decades, to still have a lot of power, but it's not. It's not really showing up at tournaments like it used to, and people just don't seem to care. It's not being bought into, and so therefore it's making them just lose so much profit. Today, I want to try and go back through the amazing history of this company and really kind of figure out what went wrong. How did they become this shell of what once was so fantastic? It's crazy to think that they've been around for almost 40 years now. They were founded back in 1979. In that time, we've seen them create so many epic franchises that have actually almost created their own genre. Think about the fact that they made Mega Man. This is one of the first ultra-hard, ultra-fun action games I ever played. It's the only game that really was a side-scrolling shooter, if I had to call it something, and it really taught me about learning patterns and figuring out boss weaknesses. It was one of the first games I ever played where I saw a blinking enemy and understood that they were about to die. It's weird to think that they invented that sort of trope. But then, as they progressed, they kept just trying to be groundbreaking. I mean, Resident Evil, a game that completely changed my life and inspired me to just keep loving horror all the way through my teen years, they made that. It was basically based on some old game called Sweet Home. It was going to be a remake of that, and that made them so much money. But flash forward, and they don't know what to do with it. Looking at Resident Evil 7 is such an interesting case because they had to do something drastically different with it. If you look at Resident Evil 6, it's actually the highest selling game in the franchise, but it's also the most hated. It had really, really cheesy cutscenes, lots of segments where you're forced to walk and listen to people tell you about zombies instead of shooting them, and then really gooey, dumb boss fights. It was super, super boring, but it was so hyped and so well advertised it made them a killing. Now, when they were going into Resident Evil 7, they knew that they had to do something radically in a new direction. Changing it to first person was bold, and I think it worked out. It was a gamble that really made them, well, it made us all rethink what we thought of Resident Evil. Now, what's really weird though is it did sell, in fact it even sold decent numbers. The weird part is they ended up losing money because they were so transfixed on the VR part. I was reading some internal documents and apparently the game was pretty dang ready to go far back. But they ended up having to rework a lot of mechanics in order to make it fully integrated into VR headsets, making it work with, I think, the Vive and of course the PSVR. That was a big push. They wanted to make it this new generation of first-person horror experiences. But all those extra months of dragged out development made it go from being able to be released in like November, which is pinnacle release window, to January. Well, it was a bit of a flaw. And I think they ended up missing out being able to get that extra spike in early profit. Those early sales and that early hype going into the holiday. And now it's a game that's still cool, but who's talking about it? There's some people that already forget that Resident Evil 7 came out this year. It flickered like a flame and burned out quick. You know, that's a really good way of really summing up the problem with Marvel Vs Capcom Infinite. I'm a pretty big fan of fighting games in general, and this is one I was actually pretty dang excited for because it's a crossover that I've always liked. Marvel and Capcom. Both of these franchises have so much staying power. You've got the X-Men and you've got Devil May Cry. What could be better than watching them duke it out? Well, I guess the big problem is if you forget to invite the X-Men. Yes, that's right. There was a giant problem with the roster of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Personally, that was my biggest issue. I thought the mechanics were good, but they also just seemed like they were trying to aim at such a wide demographic. It seemed like they were trying to appeal to the most casual audience. This, to me, should have been a clear signifier of the fact that they were, at that point, really hurting for cash. Typically, you don't aim that hardcore for a casual audience unless you really need those numbers, and it just ended up not paying off. It blew up in their faces because now the super hardcore audience of a fighting game is what advertises it. Big tournaments are what get your title out there, gets articles written about it, and gets more people buying it months and months after release. You know what's bad? Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is so unpopular right now, I saw that they've been having trouble even having people show up to tournaments. People show up at a couple of the American spots, but they had a thing where anybody who showed up to this tournament, I think it was in Brazil, they would all get to compete for this giant cash prize. 5 people showed up. They needed 6 to even have the tournament. How the hell is your game so unpopular that you couldn't get 6 people in Brazil to play it at once? That is just, it's almost depressing. Really, I want Capcom to be able to be giant and great again because they are a company that in the past has done so much cool stuff. When I think about Onimusha, that was such a freaking cool series. You know, being Jubei and seeing his cool rise to power, using his sword and getting to unlock combos. It was, in a way, my Dark Souls. When I was younger, I found it actually pretty difficult. I wasn't really used to the control style, and so figuring out combos and figuring out where to go was my personal little adventure. My personal tough challenge. Now, I'm sure most people are going to laugh at me because that game's probably really simple, but to me, the small challenge I got from it is what made it so memorable. I ended up getting every single Onimusha game, and I've secretly been hoping that eventually we'd get another, or at least a really good HD collection, brought out on the modern system. But Capcom just doesn't seem to understand how to monetize their own content. Funny enough, I feel like that this is the aspect that a lot of us forget the most often when it comes to Capcom, is that they don't really know how to sell their product. Think about it. When you look at it, a lot of times they just give you the game and nothing fancy. You need to always have that extra little thing in case people want to do it. Something else that really makes a lot of these companies now a lot of money is, well, cell phone games. That may seem crazy, but a lot of companies like Square Enix make 40% of their total money now off of cell phone games. Now, that's pretty crappy, and personally, I never ever download them, but that can actually fund you doing bigger projects. It can be something to try and grease the system between your big projects. On the upswing, you're getting the profit from your recent Resident Evil, and then on the downside, you have the Resident Evil cell phone game to try and help you keep going. They don't understand this cycle, and because of it, now they're trying to get into it, and it's just so bad. Look at the freaking Mega Man cell phone games. It's a broken mess that now is famously awful. It's a dumpster fire on phones that nobody wants to buy. Nobody wants to even look at it. People on the forums are trying to pretend that it just doesn't even exist. That is how bad it is. And really, that's unfortunately kind of what sums up what's going on at Capcom in general. Is that they have all these ideas, all this creativity, and all this love for what they've made, but then they don't know how to follow it up. They like Mega Man, but they don't know what to do with it. They like Devil May Cry, but they don't know what to do with it. And now, in the modern day, we love Capcom, and they don't know what to do with themselves. Deep down, I'm hoping that they get bought out by somebody that can put them in the right direction. I feel like they need really good management. A lot of the CEOs probably need to be replaced, and the executives, well, I think they've probably gotten lazy. Some fresh blood can really help point them in some bold new areas, because right now, Capcom's gotten stale as hell. But what do you think about this? Do you want Capcom to just die and be reborn from its ashes? Or are you really hoping that somehow these are all just bad rumors? Maybe they're doing better than we think. Sometimes a company like Konami can look like they're actually suffering when secretly they're making more than ever. So tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. You know, I'm really hoping that right before they go out of business, they just release one last giant collector's edition of a bunch of their lesser known games. I feel like there's so many great classic Capcom stuff that's just gone from history. Bring back DuckTales just one more time for me, please. One more DuckTales game, that's all I ask. Oh, hey, I was just playing a little bit of Grand Theft Auto on my Darth Vader PSP. Are you curious what I'm going to come out with next? Well, if you click this button, you'll be subscribed to be the first to know. Also, if you click over here and here, you can see my latest review and my latest top 10. I promise, it was super good. Or it was really bad and I'm sure you can just make fun of me in the comments. Either way, it'll be a lot of fun. Thanks so much for watching.